Get set for the shock of your lifetime, The Flaming Teenage, a story that will take you from hell to eternity, the true, unvarnished confession of a juvenile delinquent.
Hello, I'm John J. Thompson, and on behalf of myself and my co-producer, Bruce A. Brown, I want to welcome you to a very special episode of the True Tunes podcast. When we started this project, we had a few stories in mind that we absolutely knew needed to be told. Today, you are going to hear one of them. It's an impossibly true tale of artistic integrity and spiritual adventure told over a span of half a century, resulting in a body of work that, while certainly nowhere near as famous as it should be, has been life-giving, soul-challenging, humorous, heartbreaking, and haunting for a small but passionately devoted community of friends, fans, and supporters. And now, at 71 years old, Terry Scott Taylor has just finished a 21-song solo opus, truly a masterpiece that speaks directly to the fear, dismay, and frustration many of us are feeling, with beautiful, tangible guidance from someone who has been navigating this kind of terrain for many years.
I'm alive again, called out now, awake and breathing, called into being. A day to offer you, maybe something you can't hear any other way. Maybe worth believing. Time is running out of time, and time will tell. All will be well.
As we've been talking about quite a bit here on the show, back in the 60s, an entire generation of young people plumbed the increasingly sophisticated world of rock and folk music for spiritual threads, anything that might help them make sense of the emptiness and decay they were finding in the world around them. Between the civil rights struggles, the Vietnam War, and the relentless assault of consumerism, the world seemed to be collapsing in on itself. But some pushed against the tide, developed their own counterculture, and started a revolution in the process. As the dark side of their liberalized take on sex and drugs began to emerge, however, it seemed that the pendulum had swung too far and left them with a whole new set of problems. What they needed, it turned out, were answers. Millions found those answers in the person, words, actions, and mission of Jesus.
Oh, pieces, God is grip on me, it's drawing me on. I know that in a moment I'll be long gone. I'm feeling warm within. It's like being born again. Take me, Lord. Take me, Lord.
I know, we're in Jesus Movement season here on the True Tunes podcast, but there has been a lot to talk about. There are, however, precious few artists and songwriters who have a story and legacy like Terry's. He was one of those kids we are referencing when we talk about the Jesus Movement, although he and his friends ultimately found a less conventional musical path than many who ended up making Christian music after those heady Jesus music days. In many ways, his new album is more in line with the spirit and tone of those early sounds than the music that became so commercially successful since then.
Let the moonlight pour into the room. Hushed voices carry across the pond. I may hear the knock on the door behind me locked.
When we finally get around to opening our True Tunes Hall of Fame, Terry Scott Taylor will definitely be in the inaugural class. He has been, hands down, one of the most influential artists in mine and Bruce's lives, and in many ways, one of the reasons True Tunes needed to be created in the first place. Because, while revolutions are never sustainable, they acquiesce to one pressure or another and become mainstream. Rare individuals retain that fire in their bellies. They stay the course, torpedoes be damned, and carry the revolution forward, even if just for a small remnant. They act as leaders, taking their audience to new places, teaching, inspiring, challenging, comforting, with little or no hope of widespread recognition, remuneration, or even acceptance.
Successful man can tell at a glance if a man were born to lose. No one here is giving me a chance, except you, Lord, except you. It's a speck on the canvas of future projections, a drop in the bucket of tomorrow's successes. I have the faith and know-how. I might watch a ship come in my full potential.
That's who Terry Scott Taylor has been, as the leader of the band Daniel Amos, as a solo artist, as Camarillo Eddie in the spin-off band The Swirling Eddies, and as one of the Lost Dogs. He has also been a producer, helping other bands and solo artists bring their creative visions to life, including Starflyer 59, Randy Stonehill, Tom Howard, Jacob's Trouble, Scattered Few, Poro Blue, Mortal, Altar Boys, Crystal Lewis, and many others.
Stop. I've done everything I can do. I can't stand the pain. I've done everything I can do. Pain. I've done everything I can do. Pain. Oh, my pain. Pain won't stay. Oh, my pain.
It's one thing to grab your guitar as a teenager and hit the road in search of stardom, meaning, or just to avoid adulthood. Many people have done that. But what would keep a man at it for over 50 years, knowing that he'll barely be able to afford to make that next album? I'm as big a Bob Dylan fan as you're going to find. His contributions to the artistic landscape and to my personal internal landscape have been immense, but I wonder if he would have kept at it if there were tiny crowds, minuscule album sales, no fame, no press accolades. I wonder the same about Elvis Costello, Tom Petty, Neil Young, Jeff Lynne, David Byrne, or even the lesser famous but still successful artists like T-Bone Burnett. Taylor's name belongs on lists with people like them. But if I was to write out his life story as a novel, I bet editors would tell me it was too unbelievable. And yet, this criminally obscure songwriter and artist has produced a body of work, over 40 albums worth, depending on how you count, that has been every bit as influential as any of those famous names for me and for many of his fans. This beautiful mystery, created through the support of his fans and in collaboration with many of his lifelong friends and compatriots, has been years in the making and worth every minute of the wait. On this very special 2-part episode of the podcast, we visit with Terry Scott Taylor, first to hear about his creative and spiritual formation. What is it that kept him pushing on when the music industry and even his band's early fans seemed to abandon him and his work? What captured his imagination so profoundly that he has had so much to offer us over the last 45 years? On part 2, we will explore his new album, This Beautiful Mystery, in some detail. He'll tell us about the early vision for it, the way the songs came together, how quarantines and shutdowns impacted the process, and how he feels about it all now that it's finished. We'll listen to several songs and hear about the authors and inspirations behind them, and even get a hint at what might be coming next. So, make yourself comfortable, make sure the sound is good, get yourself a nice beverage, or maybe gather a friend or two to enjoy this with, and prepare for one of the most important conversations I have ever had the honor to participate in, right after we take care of a little bit of housekeeping.
Hey there, this is Jimmy Abeg. I'm here to tell you about something I'm involved in and so excited about that I want to share it with the rest of you. The idea of helping kids in need has long been a passion of mine, and Vision Trust has come forward with an opportunity that I can be actively involved in creating and generating both excitement and support for those kids out there. I can remember many occasions with my years with Rich Mullins where we were able to raise funds for building a school in Colombia, all the way to trips to Ecuador with Michael W. Smith to visit not only his sponsored children, but Randy Stonehill sponsored kids. My wife and I have been child sponsors since before we were married. I can tell you that for more than 43 years, this has been one of the main things in our lives. So one of the ways that I think I can help is by offering a print free of charge to anybody that wants to sponsor a kid. I think that's an amazing opportunity to join the freight train headed for goodness. So get on board. Let's get this thing rolling. Thank you to Vision Trust. Thank you for having the vision to sign up a blind man.
True Tunes is so proud to come alongside Vision Trust and Jimmy in this critical work. You've heard us talking about the investment they are making in vulnerable children's lives around the world as they support local champions and effective programs that provide both personal care for the kids and community support as well. For more information or to join us in the sponsorship journey and help rescue one child from the grip of poverty and get a beautiful handmade one-of-a-kind print from Jimmy, visit visiontrust.org/Jimmy A or find the link on the show notes page for this episode. Thank you, Jimmy, and thank you, Vision Trust. And thank you to the other Vision Trust artists out there spreading the word about this important work. Terry and his team have been sending us songs, rough mixes and such, for over a year. Some of you will remember that we actually featured one on this show a while back. I had hoped to get to Portland to interview him in person, but alas, the delays have gone on long enough. So, we booked some time in our virtual True Tunes online interview suite and got comfortable. I wish we were able to do this in person, but this is the next best thing. At least I can see you. And
yeah.
Thanks.
You look good.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for taking time to join us on the podcast today, man. I still love to labor under the belief that we're going to actually talk to people that maybe don't know you. And I know from feedback that we've gotten from the show so far that we do have some younger listeners. We've got college students. We've got folks that find this from a variety of sources. And so I want to introduce you to some folks. And I know that there are lifelong diehard fans that are like, okay, get straight into the album and let's just dissect this thing. But I don't want to rush into that because I don't want to assume that everybody already knows everything about Terry Scott Taylor. So I'd love it if we could start a little bit and set the stage somewhat and get to know a little bit about who you are and your formation creatively, because I feel like that's kind of what I'm getting out of this album as I've gone through and peeled back the layers. I'm going, oh, he's revealing a lot about the stuff that formed him. So before we get into talking about the record, I feel like it'd be really interesting to hear about your story a bit. Plus, it's also interesting that we've had all these conversations recently about the Jesus movement and Jesus music and the stuff that happened 50 years ago. There's lots of milestones going on right now. And I know that your story goes all the way back to that era as well. But it definitely diverged from a lot of what people are talking about when they consider, say, CCM music, Christian music, whatever, the mainstream stuff. So if you're game, I'd love to just kind of get a little Ken Burns on you and sort of roll film on the Terry Taylor biography a little bit.
The epic?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll kind of roll the grainy old footage now, and
All right.
everything's a little jerky, and the photos are all sepia toned, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this or if you know this, but the first interview I ever did, I was 18 years old. I had to rush after school. I still was in high school. I had to rush in my Chevette to get to work in time to interview Camarillo Eddie on a phone interview.
Oh, wow.
That was my first interview ever. And you were in character the whole time. That was the deal, I was told. He's going to be...
Oh, I was?
Oh, yeah, in character. And
I took it all the way.
Yeah,
huh?
all the way. And so
Wow,
I still have a cassette. It's a really noisy cassette. I had a suction cup microphone stuck to the telephone thing. But that was my first interview ever, however many years ago that was, 1988. So
How did Camarillo treat you?
very nicely.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear because he can be kind of surly.
He's a little cranky sometimes. What I would love to know is, what were some of the things at the very beginning of your journey that just enchanted you about music, that made you say, not only do you want to pick up a guitar and sing so that girls will like you, because that's kind of the common thing, but that caused you to actually say, there is something to this thing that's worth digging in deeper. There's something about this that I'm going to give my life to. Tell me about your childhood and your first experiences with music that caused you to really want to go into the deep end with it.
Well, when I was pretty young, I would say 7, 8 years old, I would make up little songs. I wouldn't do it in front of anybody. It was always, in secret or in another room or whatever. But I would find myself making up little rhymes and little melodies. And, I got brave enough eventually to sing one of them for my folks, my grandparents. My grandfather loved music. And as a matter of fact, the first guitar I got, with the strings off the, it's just like, bleeding, you're playing this thing and thinking this is how all guitars are. The strings off the neck, an inch and a half or whatever, trying to form chords.
Right.
And he had found it, I don't know, some shop somewhere, a very cheap acoustic guitar, and it had a crack in it. And he put glue on the crack, and then he made a music staff out of with glitter, and that was my first guitar.
Wow.
And I had was living in Dana Point at the time, Dana Point, California, and we had our little local newspaper there, and I wrote a poem about my mother, about the burdened housewife, all the things that she needs to, all of the chores and all the laboring constantly and that sort of thing. And lo and behold, they printed it. It was the first time I'd had anything published in a little newspaper there. And then I formed a little trio with a couple of friends at school. And we played the talent show and won the talent show. And then I got awarded for, I forget what it was, best musician or something, and I received an award. So it all sort of started back then. My first performance was actually even before that, probably when I was about 5 years old, and that was getting up in front of my grandfather and grandmother's church and leading "Happy Birthday" for somebody in the congregation. Wow. So that was my first student. So, wow. So skip ahead a few years. I moved from Southern California to the Bay Area in '64. Uprooted, thrown into the high school there. Didn't know anybody, and it was it was a tough time for me because I had left my friends. My dad was in construction. He had to. There wasn't much construction in Southern Cal at the time, and something was going on in the Bay Area where he could get more work, and so we just uprooted and went there. And in high school, of course, it was during the sort of drug culture, and I wasn't completely comfortable with that. My friends were, a lot of drugs going on. I participated to some extent, but I really felt that there might be a way I could achieve a natural high, and it was probably going to be through some religious experience of some sort. So I knew friends in high school. There were people that were members of the Baha'i faith, and there were Scientologists, and the whole spectrum. And I read a lot. I even read Bonhoeffer. I didn't really get it, but I read it.
Wow.
And I checked out the Rosicrucians.
Wow.
Crazy
and you're
stuff.
14, 15 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so later on, because of the band People, that was Larry Norman's band, one of my best friends was the nephew of the keyboard player in People.
Oh, wow.
And I think it was 3 of those guys or 4 of those guys, I'm not sure, you probably know better than I, were in Scientology. And so my friend suggested that we go down and take a class.
Get rid of those thetans, man.
And I'm thinking about going clear, and and at one point when I was really pissed off at my folks, I decided I was going to join the Sea Org.
Oh, wow, deep end.
Yeah,
okay.
which is huge, which is a huge decision for a kid to make. That I was just going to leave the house, pack my stuff. I was talking to the guys on the phone. They're saying, come down, they wanted me to come up to San Francisco and go to some area on the bay there and join the Sea Org. And I said, I don't know how I'll get there. I don't have a car, but I'll try to do it. Well, that didn't work out, and I'm obviously thankful that it didn't work out. So anyway, one of my dearest friends in high school that I had formed a band with called the Cardboard Scheme, and we were fairly popular in the area there. And as a matter of fact, we played with People a couple times, and he was the bass player and the chief songwriter. I was kind of like a fledgling songwriter wannabe, and I was learning a lot from this guy because he knew how to write a hook, and he knew how to write a good chorus and great melodies. And we did a lot of cover stuff, but he had introduced that into the equation. And so I was trying to write my songs and so forth. And time went on, and my friend took a lot of LSD, and then he went on. Then eventually he went on his own spiritual quest. And he would call me from time to time. He was off somewhere. I don't know. It could have been anywhere. But you'd hear sort of sitar music in the background. He'd be talking philosophically and about his visions or whatever. Well, that went on for quite some time. And then one day he called me and said, "Hey, I'm in town," which is in Los Gatos, California. He said, "I'm in town. I'd like to see you." And I hadn't seen him for maybe a year. I said, "Sure." So he comes over to the house. He's carrying this, luggage-sized Bible, and I'm going, "Oh no, I'm in for it now. I'm really in for it." Well, the beauty of the whole thing was that I gotten sort of a little bit critical of the Scientology thing, and I was seeing things with the people that were supposedly clear or operating thetans or whatever that didn't jive with. It just didn't seem real to me.
Right.
And I was beginning to kind of disillusioned. So it was a right time for this to happen. But this guy walked in, and I thought, oh boy, he's going to be a Bible thumper, and asked me to pray the sinner's prayer or whatever. And he wasn't. He was very approachable. And he was just talking about Christ. And there was something that resonated with me there. And I took that with me that day, and I contemplated it. And I had been to church as a kid, but I didn't know anything about having this idea of a personal relationship with God, that kind of thing. And so I don't want to go into a lot of detail on this, but I was in my room one night at home. And it occurred to me that this Christian thing might be true. Is it possible it's true? And then I had sort of thoughts about Scientology, and I was thinking about L. Ron Hubbard and what he had to say about life and how you could be free. And I saw these two things sort of warring with one another. And at one point, and this is where it gets a little strange, at one point, I said, well, God, you're there. Help me to see you or to know you. And the sensation of the air being taken completely out of the room. And this is indescribable for me. It's very hard for me to talk about because the words fail. A sense of presence of something holy going on. And I was both completely frightened and at the same time this yearning, because it was a real experience. It was a real thing. It wasn't in my mind. I knew it wasn't in my mind. This was actually happening. And I heard the first thing I heard was, choose today who you will serve. That was the first thing I heard. Never heard that scripture in my life.
Wow.
Yeah. And then there was something personal going on at the time. And then I heard, the trial is over. And I knew exactly what that meant and what exactly that applied to. And then I heard, remember this. I will never speak to you this way again.
Wow.
Clear as a bell, I heard this. Now, it's not like an audible voice in a room.
Right.
It's
It's almost something closer than audible, if that makes that's,
yeah, it is. Yeah. It's and I was shaking.
Wow.
I was shaking and I was weeping. And I have never heard that voice again. I hear it through the books I read. I hear it through the Bible.
Right.
I hear it through my friends. I hear it in songs.
But the bush only burned once for you.
the bush burned once for me. Yeah,
right.
That's exactly what happened.
Wow.
And that set me on another path. I was with a little trio. We were writing lots of songs. They were really good songs. We had plans to go up to Winterland and try and audition up there and get something going, get a recording, some kind of recording going and that sort of thing. And this changed my perspective a little bit. I started introducing little songs about my my first expressions of my faith into this band. And we would play them in our set.
And they were open to that because the culture, the vibe was spiritual anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And then one thing led to another, and I didn't know about any other Christian musician. I didn't know that anybody was doing anything. I didn't know about Larry or Randy or any of the bands down in Southern Cal or anything.
Right.
I thought, I'm alone in this. And I was writing these songs, and one day a guy gave me a love song album. And I put it on, and it changed everything, because I thought, these guys are good. They're really good at what they do. They're talking about their relationship with Christ, and it's not embarrassing.
Right.
It's beautiful, and it's fun, and it's whimsical. And that really changed me. And then eventually I moved down to Southern California and became part of the Maranatha music scene, Calvary Chapel, all of that. That's a whole other story. There's lots of stuff to tell in there, but
right.
That's how it all began. We recorded our first the first album, Daniel Amos record, in 1976.
Right. We're going to step away from my conversation with Terry Taylor for just a moment, but we'll be right back after this. I'm actually hitting the road with the True Tunes Live Tour. The first few live events are in the books. Thank you so much to the hosts and to the folks who have come out. You can follow all of the action at truetunes.com/events. And if you would be interested in having me come speak in your neck of the woods, drop me a line at jjt@truetunes.com and let me know. We are collecting contact info and ideas for tour dates. These things can range from large-scale on-stage talks to conversations in living rooms around a record player. If that sounds good to you, let me know. I want to take a minute to thank our Patreon backers. Our patrons get early access to shows, and we send them special higher quality audio files that they can download. If you're loving this show and would be willing to donate a few bucks a month to help us do what we do, you can find the link on the show notes page or go to patreon.com/truetunes and check it out. There is a lot more we are hoping to do with this show, and having a little more financial support would definitely make that possible sooner. Thanks so much. Okay, back to the interview suite with Terry Scott Taylor. One of the things I've been bumping up against as I've been talking about this Jesus movement and what was happening, a lot of people zero in on Calvary and Maranatha and that stuff because they have some great photos and there's music. But the way you're describing your story lines up with a lot of what I've heard from people around the country and even around the world, that there was something going on long before 1970, before Calvary, before Lonnie Frisbee and all that. And some of it, it seems that the culture you're describing where young people were exploring all kinds of spiritual avenues, from really crazy stuff, culty stuff, to traditional religious stuff, to Eastern religious. There was a lot of that spiritual kind of soil tilling going on for many years. Your story that you just said lines up with a lot of what I've heard from other people, that it just seemed like the conditions were right for many, many young people on their own path to, around the same time, find this version, this kind of refreshed version of a relationship and an understanding of Jesus and Christianity that was distanced from the institutional version that had been handed down and maybe kind of lost its way a little bit. So do you recall that being just kind of the spirit in the air? Do you remember any particular influences or reference points that sort of nudged you on that path?
Yeah, the air was thick with the craving for something transcendent, something that you could experience that would give you, tap you into something spiritual without the use of drugs that were killing people,
right.
A lot of people, or driving them insane or whatever it might be. And so I think there was just it was almost faddish to some degree, but it was a hippie movement. And then you had the Beatles that were telling you about these sort of experiences that they were having through the use of LSD or whatever. So there was just a barrage of people that were trying to get outside of themselves and be in a place, tap into something that would take them out of the mundane, the drudgery of their lives, and maybe tap into what they thought was God on some spiritual quest of some sort. And I was just another one of those people that did that. And it was through enough disillusionment with things that I had tried that drove me back to my sort of childhood roots, with the family going to Easter services and sort of sitting there with the program and fanning yourself and everybody dressing up and chewing gum or whatever, and the preacher preaching hellfire, and that wasn't what I didn't want that. But when my friend shared with me something about the person of Jesus of Nazareth, that was different.
Yeah.
that was a different deal. Who is this guy? What is this about? What does he have to say? And when God himself decided that he was going to reveal himself to me in the fashion that he did for whatever reason, people tell me, I've never had an experience like that. Why you? And I go, have no idea.
Right.
Got no idea. Maybe it's because it was the only way I could be persuaded. I have no idea.
Right.
It's a mystery.
Right.
It's a beautiful mystery. But,
Nice.
the name of my solo record. That's a plug.
There you go.
Anyway.
Well done. Well played.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Is a paradox a parable, the transcendent, the ethereal, a parallel, a variable, meek and mild and terrible in his failure of imagination, putting faith in charts and calculations. He was blind to all his limitations, while relishing every approbation. Where were we when the world was born? The planets spun, the stars were born. Jehovah riding on the storm. The club of darkness and light adorn this beautiful mystery.
Tell me about the musical palette. You had an initial start, and then eventually Daniel Amos forms with the music that Graham Parsons and the Byrds and that kind of cosmic country thing.
Yeah.
Tell me about the musical palette that you were playing in and how that was informed by the scene there in Southern California and helped form it, and then how it evolved as you started to say, okay, I'm going to sing about this faith, but I'm going to do it in my own way.
Well, I have an aunt. She's actually a year younger than me. And she was an avid singles collector, 45s. In our family, my mom and dad didn't buy records and have a record player. So there wasn't really any music coming from our house except the little tunes I was making up. But when I went over to my grandmother and grandfather's house, and my Aunt Heidi, she had all these singles, and she had the teen dream guys like Ricky Nelson, and Fabian, and
Wow.
Elvis, of course. And we would listen to these songs, and we'd even get on one song play it over and over and over. Little Eva, Keep Your Hands Off My Baby was one of the songs. Keep your hands off of my baby. Can't you get it through your head? That boy is mine. And we'd play it over and over and over again. Well, then Motown happened about the same time as the British invasion. And that, I was a Beach Boy fan. I lived in Dana Point at one point, and the Beach Boys mentioned Doheny, which was our beach down there. So we'd hear that and get all excited about that. So I was a big Beach Boy guy. Then the Beatles came in, and I was conflicted. And I didn't know you could integrate the two. I learned you could, and I did. So,
Right.
and then so it was Motown, the Beatles, the Beach Boys. That was my sweet spot. That's what I wanted to be. That's what I wanted to do. Skipping ahead, then I was also obviously got into the British invasion, but also the American bands. The Byrds were big. And Sweetheart of the Rodeo was one of my favorite records.
Which is a real left turn because it takes you totally into the desert. And,
Yeah, exactly. And I just thought, I'm going to do that kind of thing for a while. I was always aware of the fact that that it wasn't solely what I wanted to do. It was that phase of my life where I was listening to that record and this folk rock band doing this country record. I thought that's kind of cool. And so I wrote some songs in that style. And there was a woman at church, an older woman, had a husband and a bunch of kids. Her name is Katie Hazelton. And Katie was just one of these people that is constantly joyful. Just had this incredible joy about her. Laughs all the time, smiling, praising God, one of those people. But not in a sort of nauseating way. A flow of her personality, natural to her. And she said, "Hey, we've got a reel-to-reel tape recorder at home if you want to come over and record some of this stuff." And I did. And that was some of the early Daniel Amos stuff. That was my sweetheart of the rodeo stage. And so some of that made it on the first record. But I had always in the back of my mind the idea that what influenced me about making records were the Beatles, in that usually they released their record at Christmas time. And I completely loved the idea that I didn't know where they were going to take me. I just loved that. Some people didn't like that. There's a lot of former Beatle fans, after they got out of their mop top thing, Meet the Beatles and that sort of thing, when they got into some of the heavier stuff, they went, "No, I don't want to have anything to do with it." I loved it. I would open at Christmas, I'd see the gifts under the tree, and I knew that my folks had gotten me a Beatle record. I saw it wrapped. And so, it's sitting there, it's glowing, I'm ready to go for it. And I've got to go through all this other crap, to get to it, And so finally, I get it, and that's the rest of the day and into the night. I'm just in my room playing it over and over again. I got my folks to buy me a 2-track tape recorder that I could do overdubs on. And that completely opened up my world. And that was my life, is recording. And my folks were worried about me.
Right.
They were worried. They weren't worried about my brother, who was getting drunk every Friday night and
that's
sleeping
normal,
around.
Right?
That's normal stuff.
That's what boys do, right?
A guy back in his room all day long over the weekend,
right?
Doing making recordings of something else.
Yeah.
So that's where that came from, and I took that sensibility into my work in Daniel Amos. I had always had a vision from the very beginning that this is going to be eclectic, but that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to be able to share my faith and some insight, whether it's theological, cultural, whatever it is. But I wanted musically to be a surprise for people. And I thought, now that's not going to be pleasing to everyone. And it wasn't, by the way.
Yeah.
By the time Shock and Angel was about as far as they wanted us to go. And I remember Jonathan David Brown, God rest his soul, but he was our producer and engineer of Shock and Angel, and we put together this incredible record, and we had orchestration and the whole thing. We sat in, the first time we had it edited together, because it's sort of a concept, as you know. And the first time we had it edited together, and we turned the lights out, and all the orchestration was together, and we hadn't heard it in its entirety, and we wept.
Wow!
And it was just to hear it.
Yeah.
And Jonathan was fantastic the whole time and supportive. And then one day I was in the car with him, and I forget where we were going. He says, "Well, Terry," he goes, "you got it out of your system." He goes, "Next record, you need to get back to your roots," which meant the first record.
Right.
See. So we knew.
And you're thinking my roots are pet sounds. I'm going to go crazy next time.
That's right. That's right. And yeah, I was sort of shocked that he said it, but anyway, I thought, oh, this is what's going to happen with our fan base. We're going to have a lot of division here.
Yeah.
We're going to have people saying, you know, loved you as cowboys, but this, you know, space cowboys, that's a different.
He turns the TV high, the walls of paper thin. He hopes the neighbor folks are listening. He's killed his wife with words, confident it's private rage. When up goes the curtain and he's on the stage. He's on the stage, yeah. God sees it all. He's on the stage, yeah. He has total recall. It is an art, yeah. Hiding murder in your heart.
Well, you also were doing something else, because in addition to stretching people musically, definitely by Horrendous Disc, you're stretching people into being self-reflective and using humor to deliver some difficult thoughts about this journey that we're on, where most Christian music was no longer a revolution. This was now a pretty safe market, and you guys are doing songs that were questioning the institutions and questioning individuals with our thoughts and our hearts and our prejudices. And you were going in a direction that Christian music hadn't, that Christian music in terms of the stuff in that market had not gone. So you were going to get it.
Well, I think
one way or another.
I think back to that time, and I think, was I being courageous or stupid?
It doesn't have to be either. It could be both.
Well, it could be both. Yeah, it was interesting because our demographic changed quite a bit. You had the first record, and we've been doing a lot of stuff like out in Texas, you know, playing out there, and Arizona and around the South there, and then when we went with Horrendous Disc, then the eastern part of the United States, we started getting fans that came in at that point that didn't like the cowboy stuff, and then we lost some of the cowboy people. But there also have been fans that have stayed with us from the very beginning. We're smart about what we were trying to do in regard to not only these sort of exploring different styles and delivery systems, but in terms of what we were trying to say, and that these critiques were not necessarily finger pointing, in that we ourselves, you know, me personally, I knew of times when I was being a hypocrite, or I was angry at someone who I shouldn't have been angry at, or I was prideful, or whatever, I was self-aware. So I could write these songs out of my own personal experience and sort of lay that out before the listener, and have them go, oh yeah, I hear myself in that. Right. I hear this, and I think it gave a certain degree of authenticity to the faith, because I'd gone through the fake thing. I'd gone through the early stages of the fakeo. I'm a born again together Christian, and you know, and I'm going to go out there and change the world thing, and you know, trying to impress other people, hoping you're impressing other people with your spiritual knowledge and state of your being. I've been through that, so I knew the hypocrisy of that, and the pride, and so I just began to express that freely in the music. Consequences to some degree be damned. I just didn't. You know, I didn't think of consequences, and that's where I'm saying I don't know if it was just I wasn't facing reality
Right.
in that sense of
Right.
a marketing kind of strategy.
Right.
Keep entertaining the housewives where they're vacuuming, and feed them a lot of stuff that's going to just encourage them and that sort of thing, or say hard things
Right.
about myself and about all of us.
We got lost among the stars. Hollywood flash, cash, mansions and cars. Deep sea diver, let jet flyer, with a signal to the moon. Oh yeah, give me elbow room, and for heaven's sake, take this aching away. You can't run, you can't hide from the hound of heaven. You're free to choose, and you refuse the savior of God.
Did you ever just consider that if the Christian music proper market really didn't want introspective, thoughtful, theologically dangerous, and I don't mean that in a heretical way, I just mean when you start thinking about theology, it gets complicated, and pop songs it's difficult to do that well. Did you ever start to wonder if that was the right market for you to be in, and maybe you should have just gone the T-Bone Burnett, Bono, U2 route and left the Christian market behind?
We did make that effort. That was around the time of Horrendous Disc, and that was when Curb Records wanted to sign us, and that would have been what is called a secular deal. So that was our way of we were going out we were putting out feelers to try and sort of escape this label that made the ordinary person sort of look at you sideways and wonder what you were up to, So we made that effort. It wasn't for lack of trying. I mean, we'd take another show to go into all that and how that came down and what was happening there. So we thought, yeah, maybe that's something we would want to do, but it just seemed as though just the plans weren't lining up. So I eventually, and I don't know at what point in my career, I made peace with it, and then I felt like, I still have things to say to the church itself. I think that's. I think I've gone from being so much. Not that there isn't. There aren't things to criticize. There definitely are. We know in our culture now, but a voice of encouragement, and so I'm trying to be, and a voice that maybe is unique a little bit in the idea that I'm the age I am, and I'm dealing with health problems and all sorts of things, and have a real sense of my own mortality. There's not a day that goes by that I thoughts of, not in a morbid way, but just accepting the truth of getting older, and that you never know when death is going to come, and that gives you a different perspective, and I brought that into my music. It started really heavily with Daniel Amos's "Dig Here, Said the Angel."
Right.
I thought I would talk about age and our mortality and that sort of thing, and I'm doing it also in this solo record.
We'll be right back with more from Terry Scott Taylor after this. When it comes to the True Tunes conversation, there are a few things you can do that will really help us stay connected with you. First, sign up on our email list. It really is important to know that we can communicate directly with you without having to pay a middleman like Facebook for you to see what we post. Second, make sure to watch for the confirmation email and confirm it when it comes. Then, add us to your contacts so our messages don't get caught in your spam filters. Next, find us on Facebook at True Tunes Now and like us there. Find us on Instagram at True Tunes Music and follow us there. And you can follow me on Twitter at John J. Thompson. One way you can support this show is by checking out our brand new merch store at Threadless. Just head to truetunes.threadless.com to find all kinds of cool t-shirts, sweatshirts, masks, coffee cups, posters, notebooks, including 2 brand new rainbow designs. When you order through this Threadless store, they make the products and ship them directly to you. We still also have some of the original True Tunes shirts and our famous swag packs, including buttons, guitar picks, stickers, and patches, which you can order at truetunes.com. So, get yourself some cool stuff and put some gas in our virtual tank at the same time. Thanks. And now, back to my conversation with Terry Scott Taylor.
Under the I cry, my Savior. Don't be silent long. Hear the voice of my troubled heart when I lift my hands to thee. Be my hiding place in times of trouble.
Tell me about this different identities, creative identities that have come out of Terry Scott Taylor. There's Terry, the frontman for Daniel Amos. There's Terry, the solo artist. There's the Swirling Eddies. And a few years after that, the Lost Dogs. Why so many different creative hats? Tell me about that.
First of all, I'm just creatively restless. For whatever reason, I think I consider it a gift. The desire to create, the desire to have a expansive palette from which to work and to go any direction I want to go, and that is so liberating for me. And it can't all be contained in one entity, I don't think. And so that's part of when I started working for Frontline Records, which was, they were churning out an album a day almost at that point. And there was a deal there between certain parties that the owner, Frontline, had a contract where, and I think it was with Benson, I can't remember, but that Benson, or whatever the company was, had to take every record that Frontline gave them. They screwed up in ascertaining that from the contract they signed. And so there was just this demand. The more, obviously, more albums Frontline could make, the more money they would make and so forth. So I was being told, do whatever you want to do. Well, for me, that's the golden goose, you know. That's
you couldn't have put out 10 Daniel Amos records, so
right. You can't do 10. Yeah, split it up.
Right.
So not only was I doing a lot of producing at that point in time, but I decided I'd do a kids thing, which I did. I did a couple of kids things. Harry Whodunit, and I did Harry Whodunit, Fruits of the Spirit, the little cereal boxes. Yeah. Raptures, which I don't even want to name, which I don't even want to talk. I don't want to talk about it, John.
You brought it up. I brought it up at a press conference at Cornerstone, and you gave me a death stare that made me want to go back to like 6th grade and crawl under my desk. That was great.
We will not talk about that. All right. So anyway, moving on. Now everybody's going to want to check it out. That's the problem.
You invented cultural appropriation.
Exactly. I can't live it down, man. It follows me everywhere. So one of the things that I got to do, that I decided to do, is I'm going to do this alter ego, and I'm going to do a thing called Swirling Eddies, and it's just going to be fun. I'm not going to really have to think about it that much. I'm not going to have to go too deep with it. I can just have a good time. And we put it together and recorded our first record, and we kind of did a disguise thing, and we took on, you know about it. We took on the different names. I'm Camarillo Eddie.
But it was also different band members from different bands. So you had Eugene from Adam Again. You had, a couple of different guest stars in the band. At least in our world, they were stars, right?
Yeah.
Was there an intention with the Swirling Eddies that might have gone mainstream? Like, did you do an effort to try to pitch that to college radio or anything like that, or was that just apocryphal?
Yeah, we never did.
Okay.
I don't remember. You know what? Maybe we did, but I don't recall that. I just don't recall it.
The whole secret identity thing wasn't an attempt to get Daniel Amos into the mainstream away from the name.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Right.
And I mean, if you pick up that first record and you don't know who that is,
right.
You got to get your brain checked. I mean, it was pretty obvious, but
right.
But it was fun. It was a fun thing to do.
Yeah, and then so you did your first couple of solo records were definitely different than Daniel Amos in terms of the lyrical tone, even the style of music. It was a gentler approach. It was a little bit more direct in terms of the subject matter. One was dealing with they both kind of were dealing with mortality, even all the way back then. If now that you mention it, they were dealing with death. They were highly literary, although all of your stuff was literary, but dealing with references to Briefing for the Ascent was William Blake specifically. So it seemed like you were able to put a hat on that said, okay, this isn't just going to be a Daniel Amos record mixed slightly differently or with under a different name. And plus those actually weren't on Frontline, now that I mention, at least the first one wasn't. You definitely had a different creative voice when you did your solo work than when you were in Daniel Amos.
Yeah, I think what it is, it was just more personal. It was a more personal viewpoint. And the difference between subject matter of death and dying was at that time was about other people.
Right.
It was about the first death in my family that just destroyed me emotionally. Came out of that, but it was my grandfather, because he was a hero of mine and someone that I loved deeply, and it was an affectionate, wonderful man, and to have lost him. So that sort of began at that early stage to think about mortality. And now, and I have experienced, and a lot of these people, but my friends that have passed away, family members that passed away. My mom, who had Alzheimer's, who passed away. I have an uncle, a dear uncle, son of my grandfather, who now has Alzheimer's. So a lot of suffering and pain and death going on, and that tends to focus one in the moment, and those moments were that you, especially with my grandchildren, my granddaughters, to take the old, one day at a time thing, and be in the moment, the moment of their laughter, their moment of their play, the moment of their reaching up and saying, "I love you," and that's where you get your perspective changes, and these things become dear and holy to you.
Yeah.
And that's where I am in my life right now.
Dear, said the angel, I asked my heart on my grave. Maybe both, said the angel, things can go either way. a big door, you can go right on in.
I think one of my guiding principles in writing anything I write, I'll say it in a different way. And I think that's been a guiding principle for me. I think about our sort of Sunday school pictures of who God is, and who Christ is, and what it is to be a Christian. And these are implanted in most of us, or fire and brimstone, or whatever it may be. And I think I'm endeavoring to find a way in to a person who thinks they know what it is to have a relationship with God. And even saying a relationship with God has become cliche. So you're always hitting these cliches, and you're always trying to find a way through that, a way that speaks to someone, that they don't hear all the noise of the traditional way of speaking of these things. So that's always by way of metaphor. That's the power that we have as co-creators here. It's the power of metaphor, and even that fails in many ways. But that is our most powerful tool. And whenever I write a song, I'm thinking I'm writing for someone who thinks that they have it all figured out. They think they know exactly what this thing is about. They think they've heard it all. Even Christians, that they've heard it all, right? And there's nothing new to hear. And in some sense, God has quit speaking. He said all he's going to say, and right. So if you say it in a way that they have not heard it before, they're going to be attentive to it. I like someone going, "Oh, what is he saying here? Mm-hmm. What is this about?" It's intriguing to them. It brings them into the experience of the song, and we can explore it together. I love when people ask me the meaning of a song. Mm-hmm. And I've always said, what does it mean to you? Mm-hmm. And what has blown my mind in that is that people have given me stuff back that was not my intention,
right?
But yet is as truthful as what I intended. And it's a beautiful thing to hear that they've thought about it. How many people have written to me and said, every time I hear this song, I'll give you an example. It's Lost Dog song, Eleanor, It's Raining. That's a song that just drives people nuts. What is it? What is he talking about? But they're thinking about it, and they want to know, and they toss around ideas in their own minds. Oh, I think he's talking about this, and I don't want to be the center of attention on this deal. I want the song to grab them, and offer them the possibility of going deep,
right?
Of what God might be saying to them personally, not just to me or my intentions. Well, that's important, but for them, what speaks to them in a unique way that they couldn't hear before. Now they're hearing it, and it can be life-changing at that point. It's living. It's a living word. It's not dead on a piece of paper, but it becomes mm-hmm. part of their soul. Yeah. And it's a privilege to be able to have that voice with people. And it's always my intention. It is always my intention that this leads not to my ability as a songwriter, anything personal regarding myself, but that it leads to the person of Jesus of Nazareth always leads to him. That's what my life is about, and that's where I will continue to point people.
Outside the garden wall, and in the sky, fire, Eleanor, it's raining. We walked again, why, Eleanor, it's raining. It's so cruel. Winter, Eleanor, it's raining on the last summer. Eleanor, it's raining.
We're going to step away from my conversation with Terry for now. We'll be back, though, with a careful exploration of his new album, This Beautiful Mystery, on part 2 of this episode. If you think this has been good so far, hold on to your 10-gallon hats and brace yourself for what comes next. That's going to do it for this episode of the True Tunes podcast. On part 2, we dive into This Beautiful Mystery in depth and talk with Terry about what the future may hold. And as a matter of clarification, the album has only been released digitally to Kickstarter backers at this point. A couple of singles have also been released, and if you've been listening to our weekly Spotify mix, you have no doubt heard them. Another single is coming in November, but the album will not be available to the public until early 2022. For non-Kickstarters, part 2 of this episode will be your first opportunity to hear the deeper tracks from this enveloping piece of work. Do not miss it. And please, help us spread the word about this episode, this amazing album, and this incredible artist. We are hoping beyond hope that this is not only exciting for Terry's existing fans, but a way for new people to discover him and his work. So get out there and help us do that. I want to thank Bruce A. Brown for his outstanding production work. I'm not kidding when I say that when we started this show, we both knew that at some point there were a few episodes that we just had to make, and this was one of them. Bruce's love for Terry is obvious in the attention he pays to the little things that make the show sound so good. I certainly could not do it without him. I also want to thank Phil Keggy and Rex Paul for our theme song. Spoiler alert, Phil makes a special appearance on Terry's new album as well, and it is really sweet. You'll find a complete list of all of the songs used on this episode on the show notes page at truetunes.com. Please make sure to sign up for our email list. Leave us a good rating and a review at Apple Podcasts. It actually makes a huge difference. Check out our Patreon program and support us if you can. The contents of the podcast are protected by U.S. copyright law and are the intellectual property of Gyroscope Productions, with the exception of songs or clips that are from previously copywritten materials. Everything on this episode is used by permission or under fair use provisions. This program is intended for the private use of our listening audience. Gyroscope Productions can be reached at jjt@truetunes.com or P.O. Box 60401, Nashville, Tennessee 37206. Until next time, this is JJT inviting you to listen for the good, the true, and the beautiful, wherever it may be found. Peace.
Lamb of God's an action figure. He says, I'll be back like Schwarzenegger.
Swirling Eddies is one of those names that was written down in a notebook somewhere on the road or somewhere with, it's one of those deals where when you're bored, you sit around in the van or something and come up with names for bands. And that was one of the names that someone had come up with. I don't remember who. And we thought, that's a great name. It's sort of intriguing and it's fun. Captures the spirit of what we're trying to do. So, really doesn't mean anything.
Okay. No deep psychological implications.